The Trickster is one of the most unique vocations that you can use in Dragon's Dogma 2, making the game much less about what your Arisen can do in a fight and much more about how they can turn a battlefield on its head. With a focus on pawn management, illusions, and passive combat scenarios, the Trickster is an unusual class, particularly for an action RPG, since the genre usually likes to put the player front and centre in combat as much as possible. But the good news is that the Trickster, when mastered, can become exceptionally strong, leave enemies reeling in the dirt, and completely change how you play the game and even perceive combat as a whole. Because the Trickster is not only unusual, it's also one of the strongest classes in Dragon's Dogma 2, but fair warning, it may not be for everyone. It's not like your other vocations. Due to its focus on buffs and passive combat over action-oriented pursuits, choosing pawns that favour your typical playstyle is therefore essential. So, I'll kickstart this Trickster build guide by recommending you have 2 archers and a mage or sorcerer so that you can have them pummel your enemies from afar while they're distracted by your illusions. So that's my pitch. If you're still interested in this tricksy little vocation, let's get into the specifics of the best Trickster build we could muster on our playthrough. Once again, on screen you'll see a summary of exactly everything you need to make this build really work for you. So again, feel free to pause the video here so you can get an idea of everything you'll need, and let me break down the how and why. The Trickster playstyle is completely unlike any of the other vocations, mostly because it deals little to no damage whatsoever. For this class, you're going to be relying exclusively on the actions of your pawns to defeat enemies and bosses, or tricking enemies into throwing themselves off cliffs, but we're getting ahead of ourselves with that. However, just because you aren't swinging the sword, that doesn't mean you're going to be putting your feet up. Instead, you'll be assisting them with various simulacrums and buffs to help turn the tide of battle for your miniature army. When it comes to weapon skills, your Suffocating Shroud and Aromatic Resurgence will be your Trickster's bread and butter and carry the bulk of your build. The Suffocating Shroud will be used to lure a wide array of enemies to your simulacrum so that they will attack it instead of you and your party. The Aromatic Resurgence will buff your pawns so that their attacks will deal devastating damage to any and all that cross them, all while your enemies continuously ignore them. Whether you're fighting harpies or griffins, they'll be defeated in no time. Latching Effigy is useful for dispatching larger groups of enemies, especially when there's a bigger one around. Possessing one of them with your simulacrum will lure other enemies to attack it, so if you're being bothered by a horde of goblins with a Cyclops in tow, you can latch your Effigy onto the Cyclops so that the goblins will attack it, spreading a nice even amount of damage across every single one of them. The enemy of your enemy is your friend, after all. Finally, it's dealer's choice for the last weapon skill. I generally favour Dragon's Delusion, which allows you to summon an illusory dragon that strikes fear into the enemies and will either stagger or cause them to flee. It also looks sick as hell and is a decent trick for avoiding being overwhelmed by some of the bigger mobs, particularly in Batal and beyond. Now, Dragon's Delusion is also the Trickster vocation's ultimate skill, but you can learn it from the Maester and it isn't far away from where you pick up the vocation in the first place, which I'll get to in a minute. In terms of weapons, the sensors, which here is a word that means your primary weapon, that the Trickster uses will largely affect the health of the simulacrum that you generate, as well as the power of the buffs you'll be able to place on your pawns. The Dragon's Wail Litany and Whimsical Daydream are by far the best weapons you can acquire. However, they're largely for an endgame build, with the latter especially requiring you to complete many of the Sphinx's riddles, but it does reward you with money every time you hit an enemy, so those of you who are chronically broke or looking for ways to farm some cash might find it worth your while. That said, if you're not willing to take on that lengthy side quest, I favoured using the Resonant Hymn as a good all-round weapon that can be acquired relatively easily once you enter Batal. When it came to choosing rings, I opted for the Ring of Resolution to help build up my resistance to being staggered, so that I had a better chance at summoning my simulacrum without interruption. I also opted for the Ring of Triumph for some overall stat boosts to improve my chances of survival, which, when you're summoning tricky versions of yourself without much in the way of defense, is fairly important. The Trickster should also utilise the useful Detection Augment, which allows you to find Seeker's tokens a lot easier, as well as core skills that'll keep your simulacrum in play for as long as possible, like Mending Vapor, which will slowly heal your copy over time, and Effigy or Quick Burn, which speeds up how quickly you can summon your simulacrum in combat. So that's the build. It's actually pretty simple, but just in case you're in need of actually finding the vocation to unlock it, I can help you out with that too. You won't actually be able to unlock the Trickster vocation until you can make your way into Batal, filled as it is with incredibly annoying enemies that'll decimate lower level players. It's more of a mid-game kind of vocation, but if you're looking for a quick and easy way in, and you're going to do the Sphinx riddles to get the Daydream weapon anyway, riding the Sphinx into the Desert Nation after you solve her first 5 riddles is quite a good way in. getting rid of the requirement to go through the checkpoint gate or find a way to sneak around, so we'd recommend it if you want to unlock this vocation and get one of its best weapons as quickly as possible. Once you cross into Batal, getting the Trickster vocation is very easy. You have to talk to a woman called Luz at a place called the Reverent Shrine. It's southeast of the checkpoint gate, just here on the map, and you'll find a small building by a river. This is the Reverent Shrine. Walk into the building and you'll find an incorporeal figure who looks exactly like the kind of trickster we're after. This is Luz, and if you ask her everything you can, once all her dialogue is done, you'll unlock the Trickster vocation. So go forth and fool ogres into drop-kicking themselves off cliffs to your heart's content. So there you go, the best Trickster build we could come up with in Dragon's Dogma 2. Let us know what you make of it down in the comments, or if you have any tweaks, we'd love to hear those too. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more Dragon's Dogma 2 guides like this, and if you're not a fan of the Trickster, there are plenty of other builds to try in Dragon's Dogma 2, like this Thief build we put together, so check that out right here.